Emma Lawson stepped onto the dusty firing range at Camp Nighthawk with nothing but a borrowed pair of safety glasses and hands that had never gripped a rifle. The Nevada desert sun beat down mercilessly as she surveyed the elaborate tactical shooting course where Delta Force operators trained to become the most lethal precision marksmen in the military. This was it, the place where her entire life would change because of one impossible shot that would save lives when no one else could. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The operators moved with practiced confidence, their custom weapons and tactical gear, a testament to years of specialized training. Emma watched them make adjustments to their rifles, each worth more than her entire year's salary as a mathematics professor. Her own hands, more accustomed to chalk dust and whiteboard markers than gun oil and brass casings, felt suddenly out of place among these warriors. "Who invited a civilian to a Tier 1 qualification course?" muttered Marcus Reed, a battle-hardened operator whose voice carried across the range. His comment drew knowing glances from the group. "Hey, Professor, I think you took a wrong turn. The academic conference is back in Vegas." Emma didn't respond. She'd learned long ago that in rooms full of overconfident men, silence was often the strongest reply. Instead, she pulled out her leather-bound notebook filled with complex equations and trajectory formulas, theoretical ballistics calculations she'd been developing for years as part of her research in applied mathematics. While others checked their gear, she quietly studied the wind flags snapping in the desert breeze, mentally calculating drift variables. Captain James Sullivan, the lead Delta Force instructor, barely acknowledged her when he arrived. When he reached her name on the visitor clipboard, he paused as if confused. "Lawson." "Pentagon observer?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "No, sir. Ballistics consultant from MIT, Emma replied firmly. Sullivan looked her up and down, taking in her department store jeans, plain button-up shirt, and the obvious discomfort in her stance around so many weapons. "Right," he said, his tone suggesting skepticism. "We'll see what the general has to say about this." The morning briefing made one thing painfully clear. Camp Nighthawk existed to create killers of unparalleled skill. Speed and lethality were everything. "Gentlemen," Sullivan announced, pointedly ignoring Emma's presence, "this range qualifies America's most elite shooters. If you're not here to become faster and deadlier, you're wasting everyone's time." During equipment inspection, Master Sergeant Dominic Walker, the range supervisor, stopped at Emma's station. Unlike the others, she had no personal weapon to inspect. "Where's your kit, Professor?" he asked, genuinely confused. "I don't have one, Sergeant." "I've never fired a weapon before." The silence that followed was deafening. Several operators turned to stare, expressions ranging from amusement to outright disbelief. "Never?" Walker asked, stunned. "Then why exactly are you here?" "Because my ballistics algorithms predict bullet paths more accurately than current military systems," she said quietly. "General Mitchell thought they might be useful to your program." The mention of the general's name tempered the immediate dismissal, but the damage was done. Emma could hear the whispers spreading through the operators like wildfire. "This is a joke, right?" Reed said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The general's sending us math teachers now? What's next, the high school band director?" The nickname stuck immediately. "The professor." By lunchtime, Emma had heard it whispered behind her back at least 24 times, each utterance carrying tones of dismissal or mockery. She endured it all in silence, focusing instead on the data she was collecting. Wind speeds, temperature gradients, atmospheric pressure readings, all feeding into her theoretical models. She had no way of knowing that in just a few days, those same models would guide her hands to make a shot that would leave the world's most elite operators speechless, or that the very people who mocked her would eventually owe her their lives. But first, she had to survive being the academic outsider that everyone had already written off. The qualification range stretched before them like a combat zone, moving targets at varying distances, wind machines creating unpredictable conditions, and obstacle-strewn firing positions that simulated battlefield chaos. Emma felt a strange calm as she observed the setup, recognizing the mathematical beauty in the challenges it presented. This was applied physics in its purest form. "Shooters will engage 10 targets in sequence," Captain Sullivan announced through the loudspeaker. "Speed and accuracy both count. Miss a target, you're done. Take too long, you're done." Emma watched from the observation area, frantically taking notes as the operators began their qualification runs. Marcus Reed was first, his movements fluid and practiced, as he engaged targets with remarkable speed. His shots found their marks consistently, though Emma noticed slight precision degradation at longer ranges, exactly what her algorithms had predicted for rapid sequence firing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Time!" Sullivan called out. 2 minutes, 12 seconds. Solid work, Reed. The qualification continued, each operator demonstrating incredible skill. Emma recorded every detail, correlating their performance with her theoretical models. The patterns were clear. The faster they shot, the wider their shot groupings became at distance. It was exactly the problem her research addressed. When the last operator finished, Captain Sullivan approached Emma with a bemused expression. "Satisfied with your observations, Professor?" "Actually," Emma began cautiously, "I noticed consistent precision degradation at ranges beyond 400 meters. My algorithms suggest—" Sullivan cut her off with a dismissive wave. "We're not here for a lecture. These men are the best shooters on the planet." "With respect, Captain, they could be better," Emma persisted. "The ballistic calculations they're using don't fully account for Coriolis effect or density-altitude variations." The captain's expression hardened. "Professor, do you know what the difference is between theory and practice? Theory looks great in a classroom. Practice keeps my men alive in combat." Emma took a deep breath. "What if I could prove my theories are better than current practice?" Sullivan laughed, a short, humorless sound. "And how exactly would you do that? You just told Walker you've never even fired a weapon." "Let me demonstrate," she said, surprising herself with her own boldness. "Give me a rifle and let me show you." The captain stared at her for a long moment, then made a decision that would change everything. "All right, Professor. You want to prove your theories? Here's your chance." He turned to the group of watching operators. "Reed, let the professor try your Barrett." Marcus Reed stepped forward, a mocking smile on his face. "The 50 cal? Captain, she's never fired a BB gun. This will break her shoulder." "Then she'll learn a valuable lesson about respecting what we do here," Sullivan replied coldly. "Professor, you want to play with the big boys? Here's your chance." Emma found herself standing at the firing line. A massive Barrett M82A1 sniper rifle, a weapon that fired rounds the size of her index finger, being thrust into her hands. It was enormously heavy, nearly 5 feet long, and designed to destroy equipment and penetrate light armor at ranges exceeding a mile. It was perhaps the worst possible choice for a first-time shooter. "Target 6, 850 meters, Sullivan said, pointing to a steel silhouette barely visible in the distance. "One shot. Let's see these amazing algorithms in action." Emma's heart pounded as she awkwardly positioned the massive rifle. The operators gathered around, not bothering to hide their amusement. She knew they were expecting humiliation. A physics professor knocked flat by the Barrett's legendary recoil, a complete miss that would validate their dismissal of her theories. But what they didn't know was that Emma Lawson had spent the last 3 years developing ballistic algorithms that accounted for variables most military snipers didn't even know existed. She might never have fired a weapon, but she understood bullet flight physics better than anyone alive. "Professor," Walker said quietly, taking pity on her, "let me at least help you with the proper stance." "Thank you," Emma whispered, allowing the sergeant to position her body correctly behind the massive rifle. "Breathe in, then out slowly, and squeeze between heartbeats," he advised. "And brace yourself. This thing kicks like a mule." Emma nodded, then closed her eyes briefly, mentally calculating the shot. Wind speed, 8. 4 miles per hour from the northwest. Temperature, 94 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure, 29. 85 inches. Humidity, 12%. Target distance, 850 meters. Bullet drop, approximately 3. 8 meters. Spin drift. 0. 3 meters right. Coriolis effect at this latitude. Minimal but measurable. When she opened her eyes, the equations resolved into a single point of aim, slightly high and left of the distant target. She made the adjustment, took a deep breath, and squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared like thunder, the recoil slamming into her shoulder with brutal force. Through watering eyes, she saw the distant target rock violently as her round struck dead center. The silence that followed was absolute. Captain Sullivan was the first to recover. "Lucky shot," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "It wasn't luck," Emma said quietly, her shoulder throbbing. "It was math." Reed stepped forward, his previous mockery replaced by confused disbelief. "That's impossible. Nobody hits a target at that range on their first shot." "Nobody." "Again," Sullivan demanded. "Different distance, different wind. Let's see if your math holds up." The second target was at 1,100 meters, over 2/3 of a mile away. The wind had shifted, now coming directly from the side. Emma recalculated, adjusting for the increased variables at this extreme distance. The Barrett boomed again. And again, the target rang with a direct hit. Walker let out a low whistle. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. By the third perfect shot, at 1,350 meters with a quartering wind, even Sullivan's skepticism had given way to stunned silence. Emma handed the Barrett back to Reed, her shoulder numb from the punishing recoil. "Now the M4, Sullivan said, his voice carrying a new tone, something between respect and suspicion. Close quarters, moving targets. Completely different ballistic profile. The M4 carbine they handed her was lighter, designed for rapid fire at closer ranges, the antithesis of the precision shooting she'd just demonstrated. The course was dynamic. Targets appearing suddenly, moving erratically, requiring quick acquisition and multiple shot placement. Emma had never fired in full auto, never managed recoil control through a rapid sequence, never transitioned between multiple targets. By all logic, this should have exposed her inexperience and proven Sullivan right about the gap between theory and practice. Instead, it revealed something else entirely. Her first few shots were indeed awkward. The unfamiliar weapon bucking in her hands. But with each round fired, Emma adjusted, her mathematical mind rapidly processing the weapon's behavior and compensating. By the middle of the course, she was hitting targets with precision that rivaled the operator's. By the end, she was outshooting some of them. When she finished, Emma placed the M4 carefully on the bench, her hands shaking not from fear, but from adrenaline. The transformation was written on every face watching her. The academic they'd dismissed had just outperformed elite operators with weapons she'd never handled before today. Captain Sullivan approached slowly, his expression unreadable. "How?" was all he asked. "The human body is just another variable in the equation," Emma explained. "Stance, grip pressure, breathing cycle, trigger control. They all follow predictable patterns that can be modeled mathematically. I've been running these simulations for years without ever firing a shot." Sullivan stared at her for a long moment. "Report to my office at 0800 tomorrow," he said finally. "It seems we have a lot to discuss." That evening, as Emma sat alone in her temporary quarters, she examined the dark bruise blooming across her shoulder from the Barrett's recoil. The physical reminder of the day's events was almost as shocking as what she'd accomplished. In a single afternoon, she'd gone from ridiculed outsider to something else entirely. Though what exactly, she wasn't sure. A knock at her door startled her. Master Sergeant Walker stood outside, his expression softer than it had been on the range. "Quite a show today, Professor," he said. "Nobody's ever seen anything like it." "Thank you, Sergeant." "Call me Dom," he said. "Listen, what you did out there, it changes things. Sullivan's already on the phone with command. They're talking about a special program." "What kind of program?" Walker leaned against the doorframe. "The kind that doesn't officially exist. The kind that could change how we train our best shooters." He paused. "But you should know. Not everyone's happy about it. Reed and some of the others. They've got years invested in being the best, Then you walk in never having fired a weapon and make shots they've spent their careers perfecting. Emma nodded slowly. I understand. Expertise threatened by an outsider. It's more than that, Walker warned. This is their identity you're challenging. Just watch yourself. As he left, Emma returned to her notebook, adding new data points from the day's shooting. The theoretical had become practical, and the implications were only beginning to take shape. Her algorithms worked even better than she'd projected, the perfect fusion of mathematics and marksmanship. She had no idea that her unprecedented performance had set events in motion that would soon place her in the crosshairs of forces far more dangerous than resentful operators. Or that in just 72 hours a crisis would unfold that would test not just her shooting ability, but her courage and character in ways she couldn't imagine. The next morning, Emma arrived at Sullivan's office to find not just the captain, but 3 stern-faced men in civilian clothes waiting for her. The insignia pins on their lapels marked them as high-ranking military intelligence officers. Professor Lawson, Sullivan began formally, these gentlemen are very interested in your abilities. What you demonstrated yesterday is unprecedented, said the oldest of the 3, introducing himself only as Colonel Richards. A person with no firearms training whatsoever shouldn't be able to do what you did. It defies everything we know about skill acquisition. It's not about skill, Emma explained. It's about mathematical modeling. My algorithms predict bullet behavior with 99.8% accuracy under virtually any conditions. I simply applied those models in real time. And the rapid adaptation to different weapon systems? Another asked. That shouldn't be possible, Emma shrugged. Pattern recognition. Each weapon has its own mechanical signature, a mathematical fingerprint. Once you understand the underlying equations, you can compensate almost instantly. The 3 men exchanged glances. We'd like you to participate in a classified program, Richard said. Effective immediately. What kind of program? Emma asked cautiously. One that could revolutionize how we train shooters, Sullivan interjected. Your algorithms, combined with practical application, could cut training time by 70% and improve accuracy by orders of magnitude. And if I decline? Richard smiled thinly. Professor, when someone demonstrates the ability to pick up a sniper rifle for the first time and hit targets beyond 1,000 meters with perfect accuracy, declining isn't really an option. National security implications alone. Are you saying I'm being conscripted? Emma asked incredulously. Not at all, Richards assured her. We're offering you a consultant position with extremely generous compensation. But we do need your cooperation. Starting today. Emma looked at Sullivan, whose expression had changed from yesterday's dismissal to something approaching respect. What would this involve exactly? A complete documentation of your methods, Sullivan explained, and practical demonstrations with our operators. If your approach is valid with more than just you, it could change everything about how we train. Emma considered her options. The academic side of her was thrilled at the prospect of proving her theories correct on a military scale. The practical side recognized that refusing wasn't realistic. They'd classify her work and take it anyway. I want full credit for my algorithms, she said finally. Academic publication rights after declassification. And I choose who I work with. Richards nodded. Agreed. With standard security reviews. Now, shall we begin? What followed was the most intensive 3 days of Emma's life. She was paired with a team of operators, ballistics experts, and combat psychologists, all tasked with understanding and replicating her unprecedented shooting performance. Blood was drawn for analysis, brain scans were conducted, and her every movement while shooting was recorded by high-speed cameras. Some operators embraced the opportunity, fascinated by her approach. Walker became an unexpected ally, helping translate her mathematical concepts into terms the soldiers could understand. Others, led by Marcus Reed, remained openly hostile, viewing her as a threat to their status and specialization. This is a waste of time, Reed complained loudly during one session. You can't turn grunts into snipers with math homework. This isn't how it works. That's exactly what we're determining, Sergeant, Sullivan replied sharply. Now run the course using the professor's calculations. Reed grudgingly followed Emma's methodology, adjusting his aim based on her formulas rather than his trained instincts. His shots clustered tighter than they ever had before. "Lucky coincidence," he muttered, but the doubt in his voice was evident. By the third day, the results were undeniable. Operators using Emma's algorithms showed immediate improvement in accuracy at extended ranges. Even Sullivan, initially the biggest skeptic, had become convinced after seeing the data. "It works," he admitted during the evening briefing. Not as dramatically as with the professor herself, but the improvement is significant and consistent. Colonel Richards looked pleased. "We're implementing this program immediately. Full classification, codename mathematician." Emma should have felt vindicated. Her life's work had been proven correct, with real-world applications that exceeded her expectations. Instead, she felt a growing unease. The military implications of her research were becoming clearer and darker than she'd anticipated. "These algorithms weren't designed for warfare," she said quietly. "They were meant to advance ballistic science." Richards regarded her coldly. "Professor, surely you didn't think the Department of Defense funded your research for academic purposes only. This has always been the application." Before Emma could respond, the door burst open. A young lieutenant rushed in, face flushed with urgency. "Sir, we have a situation," he said to Sullivan. "Hostiles have breached the perimeter of the nearby weapons testing facility. They've taken hostages, including General Mitchell." The room erupted in controlled chaos. Sullivan immediately began issuing orders, deploying operators to secure Camp Nighthawk and prepare response options. "How many hostiles?" Richards demanded. "At least 12, sir. Well-armed and coordinated. They're demanding access to the prototype weapons in secure storage, or they start executing hostages." Emma sat frozen as the crisis unfolded around her. This wasn't her world. Equations and algorithms were predictable. Human violence was not. Yet somehow, she knew that the events of the past 3 days had been leading to this moment. A convergence of theory and deadly reality that would test everything she thought she understood about herself. "They've got the general in the main testing building," the lieutenant continued. "Snipers have no shot. They've barricaded the approaches and have spotters watching all obvious positions." Sullivan turned to his operators. "Gear up. We move in 20 minutes." As the room cleared, Emma found herself alone with Sullivan and Richards. The captain was studying a satellite image of the facility, his expression grim. "The approach is completely exposed," he muttered. "And that building was designed to withstand weapons testing. Getting in without them seeing us coming is impossible." Emma studied the image over his shoulder, her mind automatically calculating angles, distances, and trajectories. "What about here?" she asked, pointing to a ridgeline 1,870 meters from the facility. "It's outside their expected perimeter." Sullivan shook his head. "Nearly 2 kilometers away. Even our best shooters would struggle at that range, especially with these wind conditions. And it doesn't solve getting our team inside." "What if you had a shooter who could guarantee hits at that distance?" Emma asked quietly. "Someone who could create a precision distraction while your team approaches from another angle?" Both men stared at her. "You?" Sullivan asked incredulously. "Professor, hitting targets on a range is one thing. This is combat." "The physics doesn't change," Emma replied, surprised by her own calm. "And if your team needs a precision shooter at an impossible distance to save those hostages, my algorithms give you the best chance." Richards and Sullivan exchanged glances. "It's insane," Sullivan said. "She's never been in combat, never fired under real pressure." "And yet," Richards replied thoughtfully, "she's just demonstrated shooting abilities that surpass your best operators. What other options do we have?" Sullivan studied Emma for a long moment, weighing impossible variables. Finally, he nodded curtly. "Gear up, Professor. But understand this. If you freeze out there, people die." 30 minutes later, Emma found herself in borrowed tactical gear, carrying a Barrett M82A1 rifle up a rocky slope toward the ridgeline she'd identified. Walker moved silently beside her, assigned as her spotter. Behind them, Sullivan led a strike team preparing to approach the facility from the blind side once Emma's shots created the necessary distraction. "You sure about this, Professor?" Walker asked quietly as they reached their position. "There's a big difference between ranged targets and taking a shot that might kill someone." Emma's hands trembled slightly as she set up the rifle. "No, I'm not sure at all. But those people need help, and this is what I can do. Through the spotting scope, the facility came into sharp focus. Emma could see armed men moving purposefully around the main building. The hostages were visible through a large window, kneeling with their hands behind their heads. General Mitchell was easily identifiable at the front of the group. "I count 14 tangos," Walker murmured. 4 on the roof, 3 at the west entrance, 2 patrolling the perimeter, 5 inside with the hostages. Emma's mind automatically calculated the variables: 1,870 meters to target, crosswind at approximately 12 miles per hour, temperature drop of 4 degrees from the range, humidity at 8%, barometric pressure at 12 inches. Bullet drop at this distance, over 25 feet. The margin for error was measured in millimeters. "Sullivan's team is in position," Walker reported through his radio. "They need a distraction in 30 seconds to approach unseen. Primary targets are the roof sentries." Emma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of lives in her hands. The academic who had never fired a weapon before yesterday was now preparing to take shots that even veteran snipers would find daunting. "You can do this," Walker said quietly. "Just like on the range. The math doesn't change, remember?" Emma nodded, centering herself in the familiar precision of numbers. The equations flowed through her mind, resolving into clear firing solutions. She made her final adjustments and settled behind the massive rifle. "On my mark," Walker whispered. 3, 2, 1. Execute. Emma squeezed the trigger and the Barrett roared. Through the scope, she watched her first round find its mark with deadly precision, striking the nearest roof sentry. Before the others could react, she cycled the bolt and fired again, then a third time, neutralizing the rooftop threats in less than 6 seconds. "Moving targets, west entrance," Walker directed calmly. Emma shifted her aim, recalculating for the new positions. 3 more shots, 3 more hits, each at nearly 2,000 meters. A distance most snipers considered at the very edge of effective range. "Sullivan's team is approaching the blind side," Walker reported. 2 more targets, northeast corner. Emma continued her impossible performance, each shot finding its mark with surgical precision. The mathematics of death, calculated and delivered from nearly a mile away by a woman who'd never held a rifle until 3 days ago. "Team is entering the building," Walker said. "Hold fire unless directed." For the next 11 minutes, Emma waited in tense silence, the Barrett ready. Through her scope, she could see the confusion among the remaining hostage-takers. Their carefully planned operation unraveling under precision fire from an impossible distance. Then chaos erupted inside the building. Gunfire, flashbangs, shouting. Emma tensed, waiting for instructions, knowing that a mistimed shot could hit the wrong person in the confusion. "1 tango fleeing east side with a hostage," Walker suddenly called out. "He's got the general!" Through her scope, Emma saw a man dragging General Mitchell toward a vehicle, using him as a shield. The angle was bad, the hostage-taker keeping his body mostly behind the general. "Professor, if he gets to that vehicle, they both disappear," Walker said urgently. Emma calculated frantically. The target was moving erratically. The hostage was in the way. The wind had shifted. 1,000 variables, all changing by the second. "I don't have a shot," she said, the first time she'd spoken since they'd arrived at the position. "You have to take it," Walker insisted. "There's no one else who can make this shot." Emma took a deep breath, her mind racing through calculations faster than ever before. Then, in perfect clarity, she saw it. Not a shot at the hostage-taker, but at the weapon in his hand. A target the size of a playing card, partially obscured, moving unpredictably at nearly 2,000 meters. The Barrett boomed one final time. Through her scope, Emma watched the hostage-taker's weapon fly from his shattered hand. Sullivan's team converged on him seconds later, tackling him to the ground as the general broke free. "Holy shit!" Walker breathed beside her. "That's not possible." That shot's not possible. But it was. The mathematician who had never held a rifle until the Delta Force captain handed her his Barrett and M4 had just made a shot that would rewrite the books on what was considered possible in the art of precision shooting. As they made their way back down the ridge, Emma felt strangely detached from her own accomplishment. The physics had worked exactly as her equations had predicted. The impossible had proven merely improbable when properly calculated. Sullivan met them at the base of the ridge, his expression a mixture of disbelief and respect. "The general is safe, all hostages recovered. Your shots." He shook his head. "We'll be studying the footage for years." Emma handed him the Barrett, suddenly exhausted. "The math doesn't change, Captain. That's all it ever was." Sullivan studied her for a long moment. "No, Professor. It wasn't just math. It was courage. You risked your life based on theoretical calculations. That's something no equation can predict." As they walked back toward the vehicles, Marcus Reed approached. The hostility in his expression had been replaced by something new. Respect. Perhaps even awe. "Professor," he said simply, extending his hand. "I was wrong about you." Emma accepted the handshake, too tired for triumph. "We both had something to learn, Sergeant." That evening, as medical teams treated the rescued hostages and security forces processed the captured hostage-takers, Emma sat alone in her quarters, trying to process everything that had happened. In less than a week, she had gone from never having held a rifle to making shots that the world's most elite operators considered impossible. A knock at her door revealed General Mitchell himself, still bearing the marks of his ordeal but very much alive. "Professor Lawson," he said warmly, "I understand I owe you my life." "I just applied the math, General." Mitchell smiled. "From what Captain Sullivan tells me, you did considerably more than that." He sat down across from her. "I've authorized a new program. The integration of your ballistic algorithms into our advanced training protocols. We're calling it Project Catalyst." "Sir, I'm not sure I—" "You don't have to decide tonight," Mitchell interrupted gently, "but I want you to consider something. What you did today saved lives. What you could do in the future, teaching others your methods, refining the science of precision shooting, could save many more." After the general left, Emma returned to her notebook, adding new data points from the day's events. The theoretical had become lethally practical, and the implications were still unfolding. What she didn't yet realize was that her unprecedented journey from academic to expert marksman had just begun. The woman who had never held a rifle until a Delta Force captain handed her his Barrett and M4 was about to revolutionize the science of precision shooting forever. But first, she had one more calculation to make, the most important one of all, whether to embrace this new path or return to the safety of academic theory. As the desert night settled around Camp Nighthawk, Emma Lawson made her decision, knowing that either choice would change her life forever. Emma woke the next morning to find Camp Nighthawk transformed by her impossible shots. Where yesterday she'd been a curiosity, today she was a phenomenon. As she made her way to the mess hall, conversations stopped and heads turned. The atmosphere reminded her of academic conferences after she'd published a groundbreaking paper, but with a crucial difference. These weren't theoretical peers. These were elite warriors who dedicated their lives to mastering skills she'd demonstrated in a single afternoon. "Professor," Walker called, waving her over to a table where he sat with several other operators. "Join us." Emma hesitated, then navigated through the crowded hall to his table. The operators made room, their expressions ranging from curiosity to guarded respect. "I hear the general's offering you a permanent position," Walker said, sliding a coffee toward her. "News travels fast," Emma replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "He calls it Project Catalyst. So you'll be staying?" asked one of the other operators. "Garcia," she remembered from yesterday's operation. "I haven't decided," Emma admitted. "My research at MIT." "Can wait," interrupted a new voice. Emma looked up to see Captain Sullivan standing over their table, his expression serious. "Meeting in 5, Professor. My office." As Sullivan walked away, Walker leaned closer. "He's been reviewing the footage from yesterday all night. That final shot, the one that disarmed the hostile without hitting the general, it's become something of a legend already." "It was just mathematical probability," Emma insisted. Garcia shook his head. "No, ma'am. I've been doing this 15 years. What you did wasn't just math." 5 minutes later, Emma found herself once again in Sullivan's office. This time, however, she wasn't facing skepticism, but something more complex, a grudging reevaluation that seemed to pain the captain almost physically. "I've been training operators for 12 years, Sullivan began without preamble. I've worked with natural talents, combat veterans, Olympic marksmen. Never seen anything like what you did yesterday. He pushed a folder across his desk. Project Catalyst. The General wants your answer by 1,800 hours. Emma opened the folder. Inside was a contract for a civilian specialist position, with a salary that made her academic compensation look paltry by comparison. The mission: to develop and implement new training protocols based on her ballistic algorithms. Why me? She asked, looking up. You could take my research, my algorithms. It's not just the algorithms, Sullivan interrupted. It's how you applied them under pressure. The team analyzed your biometrics during the operation. Heart rate, breathing pattern, neural activity, all optimal for precision shooting, like your body was designed for it. He paused. And there's something else. Your learning curve with different weapons is unprecedented. What takes operators months, you're doing in hours. What exactly would this position entail? Initially, documentation. We need to understand exactly how your method works, the calculations, the applications, everything. Then, implementation. Working with select operators to teach them your approach. Sullivan leaned forward. But there's more. The General believes you could be more than a teacher. Meaning? Meaning we want to see how far your abilities can go. With proper training, you might become something entirely new. A combat mathematician. Someone who can make the impossible shots when no one else can. Emma felt a chill. Yesterday's operation had been exhilarating, but terrifying. The idea of purposefully placing herself in similar situations was daunting. I'm an academic, Captain, not a soldier. Yesterday suggests otherwise, Sullivan countered. But the choice is yours. You've already signed enough non-disclosure agreements to be buried under Guantanamo if you breathe a word of this. You can go back to MIT with the official story that you consulted on theoretical ballistics and nothing more. Or, he gestured to the folder, you can help us change everything about how we develop precision shooters. Emma stared at the contract, feeling the weight of the decision. Can I think about it? Sullivan nodded. Until 1800. Then the General needs your answer. As she left his office, Emma nearly collided with Marcus Reed in the hallway. His earlier hostility had been replaced by a complex expression, part respect, part confusion, and something else she couldn't quite identify. Professor, he acknowledged stiffly. Sergeant Reed. He seemed about to walk past, then stopped. That shot yesterday. The one that disarmed the hostile without hitting the General. He shook his head. I've been running the calculations. At that distance, with those variables, it shouldn't have been possible. But it was, Emma said simply. That's just it, Reed replied, his voice losing some of its edge. It makes me wonder what else might be possible. He hesitated. Are you staying? I haven't decided. Reed studied her for a moment. For what it's worth, you'd be wasted in a classroom. With that, he continued down the hallway, leaving Emma to ponder his unexpected words. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of meetings with military officials eager to understand her methodology. Emma patiently explained her algorithms, demonstrating how traditional ballistic calculations failed to account for crucial microvariables that became significant at extreme distances. It's like weather forecasting, she explained to one group of ballistic technicians. The butterfly effect. Small inputs create massive differences in outcomes over distance and time. My algorithms track more variables with greater precision. By afternoon, she found herself back on the range, this time with a new audience, senior military officials who had flown in overnight after hearing about her performance. We'd like to see a demonstration, a stern-faced general requested. If you don't mind. Emma had expected this. News of her shots had traveled fast, and the military hierarchy wanted verification. Sullivan stood nearby, his expression neutral but his body language tense. What would you like me to demonstrate? Emma asked. Your choice, Professor, the general replied. Impress us. Emma considered her options. Standard target shooting would seem pedestrian after yesterday's feats. She needed something that would demonstrate not just accuracy but the true value of her mathematical approach. I need 6 rifles, she said finally. Different makes, models, and calibers. and I need them fired by your people first." The general raised an eyebrow but nodded to Sullivan, who issued the orders. 30 minutes later, Emma stood before a table bearing 6 different weapons, from a standard M4 to a vintage Dragunov SVD sniper rifle. Each had been fired by Camp Nighthawk's operators at a standard target array. "Each of these weapons has different ballistic characteristics," Emma explained to the watching officials. "Different muzzle velocities, different rates of twist, different harmonics. Traditional marksmanship treats these differences as obstacles to be overcome through practice and familiarity." She picked up the first rifle, a modern Scar H. "I see them as mathematical constants in an equation." What followed left even the most jaded officer speechless. Emma fired each weapon in sequence, placing shots in perfect groups despite never having handled most of them before. More impressively, she identified and compensated for mechanical issues the armorers hadn't detected: a slightly bent barrel on the Dragunov, a trigger spring issue on the M4. "The weapon speaks through mathematics," she explained as she set down the final rifle. "Every mechanical imperfection, every design characteristic creates a unique signature that can be calculated and compensated for in real time." The general who had requested the demonstration approached, examining the targets with open amazement. "Professor Lawson, I've been in the military for 35 years. I've never seen anything like this." He turned to Sullivan. "Project Catalyst has my full support, whatever resources you need." As the officials departed, Sullivan approached Emma. "Decision time, Professor. Are you in or out?" Emma looked at the firing range, then back at the operations center where yesterday's crisis had unfolded. The academic path offered safety, predictability, respect among peers who valued theory. This new path offered what exactly? Danger, certainly. The unknown. But also the chance to see her life's work applied in ways she'd never imagined, to save lives rather than just advance knowledge. "I'm in," she said finally. "But on one condition." "Name it." "I choose my team, the people I'll work with directly." Sullivan nodded slowly. "Within reason. Who did you have in mind?" "Walker, for starters. He knows how to translate between your world and mine." She hesitated, then added, "And Reed." Sullivan's eyebrows shot up. "Reed? The same Reed who's been giving you grief since you arrived? He's your best technical shooter, and he's not afraid to challenge assumptions, including mine. I need that." A slow smile spread across Sullivan's face, the first genuine one she'd seen from him. "You're already thinking like an operator, Professor. Choosing team members for complementary skills rather than compatibility." He extended his hand. "Welcome to Project Catalyst." The next morning, Emma met her new team in a repurposed hangar that would serve as their dedicated facility. Walker arrived first, followed by 3 operators she'd worked with during the crisis. Reed showed up last, his expression still guarded but lacking the open hostility of their first encounter. "Professor," he acknowledged with a nod. "Sergeant Reed," she replied. "Thank you for joining us." "Orders are orders," he said, but without much heat. Sullivan called the group to attention. "Listen up. Project Catalyst has been classified at the highest level. What happens in this facility stays in this facility." He gestured to Emma. "Professor Lawson will be leading the research and development phase. You're here because you're the best we have. Your job is to learn her methods, help refine them, and determine how to implement them across select special operations units." Emma stepped forward, suddenly conscious of the scrutiny from these elite operators. In academia, her authority came from published papers and peer review. Here, she was asking career soldiers to reconsider fundamental aspects of their training, based on theories most had never encountered. "I know this is unconventional," she began. "You've all spent years mastering your craft through traditional methods. I'm asking you to approach it from a different angle, to see shooting as applied mathematics rather than just physical skill." "With respect, Professor," one of the operators interjected, "we already use math. Ballistic tables, range calculations, wind calls. It's all part of the job." "Yes, but you're using simplified approximations," Emma explained. "Think of it like navigating with a roadmap versus GPS with real-time traffic data. Both will get you there, but one accounts for many more variables." She turned to a whiteboard and began writing equations. Traditional ballistics treats the bullet's path as a modified parabola affected by a few major forces. My approach models it as a dynamic system influenced by dozens of micro-variables. For the next hour, Emma outlined her methodology, explaining how her algorithms integrated factors most ballistic systems ignored, from the Earth's rotation at specific latitudes to microscopic barrel harmonics during firing. Reed, who had remained silent, finally spoke up. "This all sounds great in theory, Professor, but how do we apply it in the field? We can't exactly solve differential equations while taking fire." It was a fair question, and one Emma had anticipated. "You're right. That's why we need to develop a new training protocol that internalizes these calculations. Just like you don't consciously think about trigger control anymore, we need to train your brains to automatically account for these variables." "Is that even possible?" Walker asked. "I did it," Emma pointed out. "In 3 days, I went from never having fired a weapon to making shots you all considered impossible. With proper training and the right mental framework, you can do the same." The team exchanged skeptical glances, but Emma could see the seed of possibility taking root. These were men who had dedicated their lives to mastering impossible skills. The chance to push those boundaries further was a powerful motivator. "Where do we start?" Reed asked, his tone suggesting he was still dubious but willing to be convinced. Emma smiled. "We start by forgetting everything you think you know about precision shooting." The next 3 weeks were the most intense of Emma's life. Days began before dawn and ended well after midnight as she worked to translate her theoretical knowledge into practical training protocols. The team progressed from mathematical foundations to applied shooting drills, each designed to rewire their approach to marksmanship. Walker adapted quickest, his natural teaching ability helping him bridge the gap between theory and application. The other operators followed, showing steady improvement as they incorporated Emma's methods. Reed remained the skeptic, challenging every assumption and demanding proof for each new concept, a role Emma came to value more than she expected. "Your calculations for spindrift are off at extreme angles," he pointed out during one session, showing her data from his morning shoot. The actual impact point was 3.2 centimeters left of predicted. Emma examined his results, impressed by the precision of his analysis. "You're right. The algorithm doesn't fully account for gyroscopic precession at steep declination angles." She made notes in her ever-present notebook. "This is exactly why I wanted you on the team, Reed. You see the gaps." A hint of pride flickered across his face before he masked it with his usual professional demeanor. "Just doing my job, Professor." By the end of the 3rd week, the results were undeniable. The team was consistently hitting targets at ranges previously considered at the extreme edge of possibility, and doing so with first-round accuracy that defied conventional wisdom. "It's working," Sullivan admitted during their weekly review. "The General is impressed. How soon before we can implement this across select units?" Emma hesitated. "The method works, yes. But there's still something missing." "What do you mean?" Sullivan asked, frowning. "The team is performing exceptionally well in controlled conditions," Emma explained. "But combat isn't controlled. We need to test the methodology under stress, unpredictability, consequences." Sullivan studied her for a moment. "You want to run a combat simulation?" "Not just any simulation," Emma clarified. "One that pushes them beyond normal parameters. We need to see if the mathematical approach holds up when everything else falls apart." 2 days later, Emma watched from the command center as her team prepared for the most grueling test yet. The scenario, a hostage rescue operation in deteriorating conditions, with environmental factors shifting unpredictably throughout the mission. "Rain machines active in 2 minutes, a technician announced. Wind generators cycling through programmed patterns. Sullivan stood beside Emma, watching the monitors with a tense expression. "You designed this scenario to break them, didn't you?" "I designed it to break traditional shooting methods," Emma corrected. "If our approach is valid, they should adapt." The simulation began with textbook precision. The team moved through the course methodically, engaging targets with the calculated accuracy they'd developed over the past weeks. Then the environment shifted dramatically. Visibility dropped, winds gusted unpredictably, and automated targets began moving in patterns they hadn't trained against. Emma watched Reed closely, As the team's most technically proficient shooter, he had also been the most resistant to fully embracing her methodology. Now, as conditions deteriorated, she saw him hesitate, visibly caught between his instincts and her teachings. "He's reverting," Sullivan observed, falling back on his training. Emma nodded, unsurprised. "It's natural. Under stress, we default to what feels familiar." On the monitor, Reed missed a difficult shot, then another. His frustration was evident even through the rain-soaked camera feed. The rest of the team was struggling as well, their carefully calibrated approach faltering under extreme conditions. "Should we abort?" Sullivan asked as the mission metrics began to trend toward failure. "No," Emma said firmly. "They need to work through this. It's the only way they'll truly understand." The breaking point came 15 minutes into the simulation. Reed, facing a nearly impossible shot through gusting winds and artificial fog, threw down his rifle in frustration. "This is bullshit." His voice came clearly through the audio feed. "No system accounts for this level of variable change." Emma reached for the communication system. "Sergeant Reed, remember the core principle. The math doesn't change, only the inputs do. Stop fighting the conditions and start reading them." There was a long pause. Then Reed retrieved his rifle. Emma watched as he took a moment to center himself, his posture shifting subtly. He began making micro-adjustments, clearly running through her algorithms mentally as he processed the changing conditions. His next shot found its mark. Then another. Soon, the entire team had adapted, their performance stabilizing despite the chaotic environment. "Remarkable," Sullivan murmured. "They're actually doing better as conditions worsen." "Because now they're truly applying the methodology," Emma explained. "Not just following formulas, but understanding the underlying principles. Chaos becomes just another variable in the equation." When the simulation ended, the team emerged, soaked, exhausted, but successful. Their performance metrics showed something unprecedented: improvement under deteriorating conditions, directly contrary to established performance models. Reed approached Emma as the team debriefed, his expression transformed. Gone was the skepticism, replaced by something approaching wonder. "I get it now," he said quietly. "It's not about memorizing formulas or following some academic theory. It's about seeing patterns where others see chaos." Emma nodded. "That's exactly right. Mathematics isn't rigid. It's the most adaptable tool we have for understanding complexity." Later that evening, Emma sat alone in her quarters, reviewing the day's data. The breakthrough was more significant than even she had anticipated. The team hadn't just applied her methods, they'd begun to internalize the underlying principles, developing an intuitive understanding of complex ballistic behavior that transcended conscious calculation. A knock at her door interrupted her analysis. Sullivan entered, carrying a sealed folder with classified markings. "The General's impressed," he said, placing the folder on her desk. "Project Catalyst has been approved for Phase 2. "Phase 2? Emma hadn't been briefed on any expansion of the program. Sullivan nodded. "Field implementation. We're deploying the team to apply the methodology in actual operations." Emma felt a cold shock. "Deploying? When?" 3 days. Sullivan studied her reaction carefully. "This was always the goal, Professor. Developing the methodology was only the first step. Now we need to prove it works where it matters most. But the team needs more time." "The team is ready," Sullivan interrupted. "The question is, are you?" Emma stared at him, confused. "Me? I'm not deploying with them. I'm a civilian consultant." Sullivan slid the folder toward her. "Read the operational parameters." With growing unease, Emma opened the folder. The mission brief described a high-value target extraction in a remote mountain region, requiring precision fire support at extreme ranges in unpredictable conditions. Near the bottom of the page, a personnel list included her name with a designation she'd never seen before. Technical Specialist, Combat Mathematics. "You can't be serious," she said, looking up at Sullivan. "I'm not a soldier. I've never deployed. I've barely been trained." "You've demonstrated capabilities no one else has," Sullivan replied calmly. "And this mission requires exactly those capabilities. The target location is in a valley surrounded by ridge lines." The nearest viable shooting position is over 2,100 meters away, beyond the effective range of our best snipers under ideal conditions. And conditions there are far from ideal. Why not send Reed or Walker? They've been training with my methods. They're good, getting better every day, but they're not you. Sullivan leaned forward. The mission brief doesn't tell the whole story. The high-value target is an American intelligence officer being held by a terrorist cell. The extraction window is less than 30 minutes. One shot, at extreme range, in mountain conditions with a man's life hanging in the balance. He paused. Sound familiar? Emma thought back to the hostage crisis, to the impossible shot she'd made to save General Mitchell. You're asking me to do that again, but in actual combat. I'm asking you to do what only you can do, Sullivan corrected. The team will handle the extraction. All you need to do is make one shot at the critical moment, a precision distraction that will allow them to approach unseen. Emma stood, pacing her small quarters. Everything in her rational mind screamed that this was insanity. She was a mathematician, an academic, not a special operations shooter. Yet the evidence of the past month suggested otherwise, that she possessed a unique ability that transcended traditional categories. What if I refuse? Sullivan sighed. Then we send the team without you, and accept a significantly higher risk of failure. We try to apply your methods, but... He shrugged. Some things can't be taught in 3 weeks. The weight of responsibility settled on Emma's shoulders. Lives would depend on this decision. Not theoretical lives in some academic exercise, but real people with names and families. I need to think about this, she said finally. Sullivan nodded, rising to leave. You have until tomorrow morning, but Professor, he paused at the door, whatever you decide, remember this. Sometimes the greatest contribution comes not from what we create, but from what we do with it when it matters most. After he left, Emma sat motionless, staring at the mission brief. The woman who had never held a rifle a month ago was now being asked to deploy on a combat mission to save a life that might otherwise be lost. The academic who had pursued mathematics as a path to universal truth now faced a very specific, very human application of her theories. The question wasn't whether she could make the shot. The mathematics suggested she could. The question was whether she should be the one to take it, whether this unexpected path was one she was willing to follow to its logical conclusion. As the desert night deepened around Camp Nighthawk, Emma Lawson made the decision that would transform her from a civilian consultant into something unprecedented in military history, a combat mathematician whose calculations would soon mean the difference between life and death in one of the most dangerous regions on Earth. Dawn broke over the Afghan mountains with cold clarity, painting the jagged peaks in gold and shadow. Emma watched the sunrise from the open door of a military transport plane, her mind racing with calculations, even as her body tensed with pre-mission adrenaline. In the 29 hours since she'd agreed to join the operation, she'd been thrust into a crash course on tactical deployment protocols, cultural briefings, and emergency medical procedures. Her head spun with information, but through it all, one thought remained crystal clear. Someone's life depended on her ability to translate mathematical theory into a single, perfect shot. 5 minutes to drop zone, the jump master called out. Emma glanced around the cargo hold at her team. Walker gave her a reassuring nod from where he sat checking his equipment. Reed was motionless, eyes closed in what she recognized as pre-mission meditation. Sullivan, who had insisted on leading the operation personally, was reviewing last-minute intelligence reports with intense focus. Professor, Sullivan called, moving toward her. Final briefing. Emma joined him at a digital map display. The high-resolution satellite imagery showed their target area in extraordinary detail, a remote mountain village where intelligence indicated the captured American agent was being held. Our latest intel confirms the target is in this building, Sullivan indicated a stone structure on the eastern edge of the village. He's being moved within the next 12 hours, destination unknown. This is our only window. Emma studied the terrain, her mind automatically calculating angles, elevations, and distances. The ridgeline here, she pointed to a rocky outcrop 2,180 meters from the village, provides the optimal firing position based on wind patterns and sightlines. Sullivan nodded. That's where you and Walker will set up. The extraction team, Myself, Reed, and Daniels will approach from the west, using the creek bed for cover. At exactly 0745, we need a precision distraction shot to draw attention away from our approach." He paused, making sure she understood the gravity of the situation. "The shot needs to be perfect, Professor. Not close, not good enough. Perfect." "What's the target?" Emma asked. "The communications array on the roof of this building." Sullivan indicated a structure on the opposite side of the village from where the hostage was held. "Take it out, and you'll create confusion while eliminating their ability to call for reinforcements. But it needs to be a clean hit. No collateral damage, no risk to civilians." Emma calculated the parameters in her head. A target the size of a small satellite dish at over 2 kilometers, in mountain conditions with unpredictable wind patterns. It would be the most challenging shot she'd ever attempted. "I'll need environmental readings as soon as we reach the position," she said. "Barometric pressure, humidity, temperature gradients." "Walker will have the equipment," Sullivan assured her. "You'll have approximately 30 minutes to set up and prepare before the execution window opens." The plane banked sharply, beginning its descent. Emma gripped her harness, the reality of the situation finally hitting her full force. She wasn't in a controlled range environment anymore. This was combat, with all its chaos and consequences. "One more thing," Sullivan said quietly, his expression grave. "If the operation is compromised, if extraction becomes impossible, you have secondary authorization." Emma stared at him, understanding the unspoken implication. "You mean, the agent knows too much. Capture isn't an option for him, or for us." Sullivan held her gaze steadily. "Let's make sure it doesn't come to that." The drop zone appeared below them, a small clearing barely large enough for the specialized helicopter that would take them the final leg of their journey. As the plane touched down, Emma felt a strange calm settle over her. The countless variables that had seemed overwhelming now resolved themselves into a single equation with a clear solution. Make the shot, save a life, come home. The helicopter insertion went according to plan, depositing the team at separate locations before dawn. Emma and Walker began their ascent to the ridgeline position, moving silently through the pre-dawn darkness. Walker, she quickly realized, was worth his weight in gold, anticipating her needs, guiding her through difficult terrain, and maintaining a reassuring presence without unnecessary conversation. They reached the firing position with 42 minutes to spare, more time than planned, a buffer against the unexpected. Walker immediately began unpacking the Barrett M82A1 rifle she would use, while Emma set up the portable weather station that would provide the crucial environmental data for her calculations. "Wind's tricky here," Walker murmured as he assembled the rifle. "Mountain valleys create unpredictable currents. Standard wind calls won't cut it." Emma nodded, already noting the complex patterns in the way the early morning air moved through the valley. "I'll need continuous readings until the moment of execution." For the next 30 minutes they worked in synchronized silence, each focused on their specialized tasks. Emma compiled data, running calculations through her customized ballistic computer while simultaneously creating manual backups in her notebook. Walker established their hide position, camouflaging them from potential observers while ensuring Emma had a clear firing lane. "Extraction team in position." Sullivan's voice came through their secure communications system. "Status? Ready," Walker replied, looking to Emma for confirmation. Emma made a final adjustment to her calculations. The shot would require compensation for no fewer than 14 separate variables, including a 3-dimensional wind pattern she'd never encountered before. The mathematics was sound, but the application would test the limits of her abilities. "Ready," she echoed, settling behind the Barrett. Through her scope, the village came into sharp focus. She could see movement as people began their morning routines, unaware of the operation unfolding around them. The communications array was clearly visible on the rooftop Sullivan had indicated, a satellite dish with associated electronic equipment. "Execute in 2 minutes." Sullivan's voice was calm, professional. "Stand by." Emma took a deep breath, centering herself in the familiar precision of numbers. The distance, 2,183 meters. Wind, variable, averaging 7. 3 miles per hour from the northwest with vertical components of 2. 1 mile per hour. Temperature, 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure, 24. 8 inches mercury. Humidity, 27%. Elevation angle, -3. 2 degrees. Bullet drop at this distance and angle approximately 114 feet. Coriolis effect, 3. 7 inches right. Spin drift, 11. 2 inches right. The variables resolved into a firing solution that seemed almost impossibly precise. To hit the target would require adjustments measured in fractions of a millimeter. 30 seconds, Sullivan announced. Emma made her final adjustments, the world narrowing to the view through her scope. The mathematics didn't change. The physics remained constant. All that mattered was the perfect application of universal principles. Execute. Emma squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared, the massive rifle punishing her shoulder despite its recoil compensation system. Through her scope, she watched the round travel, an impossibly long second and a half, during which the bullet traversed over 2 kilometers of mountain air, affected by countless microvariables, each one accounted for in her calculations. The communications array exploded in a shower of electronic components. Direct hit, Walker confirmed, his professional tone barely concealing his amazement. Target neutralized. Proceeding with extraction, Sullivan acknowledged. Maintain overwatch. Emma exhaled slowly, allowing herself a moment of relief before refocusing. The most difficult part of her mission was complete, but the operation was far from over. Through her scope, she could see the confusion her shot had created. Guards running toward the destroyed communications equipment, attention diverted exactly as planned. Walker maintained a running commentary as he observed the extraction team's progress. They're approaching the target building from the blind side. No opposition detected. Sullivan's team is entering now. The next 4 minutes were the longest of Emma's life. She kept her scope trained on potential threat positions, ready to provide covering fire if needed, though she hoped it wouldn't be necessary. The mission called for stealth and precision, not a firefight. They've reached the hostage, Walker reported. Extraction in progress. Emma allowed herself to believe, for the first time, that the mission might succeed without further complications. Her shot had created the perfect distraction, and Sullivan's team was executing the extraction flawlessly. Then everything went wrong. Movement from the north entrance, Walker said suddenly, his voice tense. 4 armed tangos approaching the target building. Emma shifted her scope, immediately identifying the threat. 4 men with rifles moving purposefully toward the building where Sullivan's team was extracting the hostage. Sullivan, you have incoming, Walker transmitted. 4 armed hostiles approaching from the north. 30 seconds to intercept. Understood, Sullivan's reply was terse. Need more time. Hostage is wounded, moving slow. Emma calculated rapidly. The extraction team needed at least 2 more minutes to clear the building and reach their exfiltration route. The approaching hostiles would intercept them in less than 30 seconds. A direct engagement would compromise the entire operation and potentially cost lives. Walker, she said quietly, I need firing solutions on all 4 targets. Walker stared at her. That's not the mission profile. We're authorized for the communications array only, unless the operation is compromised, Emma finished. It's about to be. Walker hesitated only briefly before providing the data she needed. Targets moving in a staggered formation. Lead target at 2,165 meters, bearing 057. Second target 2,163 meters, bearing 056. Third and fourth approximately 5 meters behind, same bearing. Emma rapidly processed the new variables. 4 targets, moving unpredictably at extreme range, with lives hanging in the balance. The mathematics was the same, but the stakes had exponentially increased. I need to take all 4, she said, her voice strangely calm. Simultaneously. That's impossible, Walker replied, then caught himself. I know what you mean, Emma said, already making her calculations. But we don't have a choice. The solution came to her with crystal clarity. Not 4 separate shots, which would take too long, but a single shot that would create a cascading effect. The physics was theoretically sound, though she'd never attempted anything remotely like it in practice. Target the lead hostile's weapon, she explained, as she made her adjustments. Proper impact angle will create a ricochet effect through their formation. Walker's expression showed his disbelief. but he trusted her enough not to question further. Lead target changing pace, 25 seconds to intercept. Emma settled behind the rifle, her mind perfectly clear. The shot would require precision beyond anything she'd attempted before, not just hitting a moving target at over 2 kilometers, but hitting it at the exact angle needed to create the desired effect. She squeezed the trigger. The Barrett thundered again, sending its massive round downrange. Through her scope, Emma watched as physics unfolded exactly as she'd calculated. The bullet struck the lead hostile's rifle at a precise angle, causing it to explode into high-velocity fragments that tore through the tightly grouped formation behind him. All 4 hostiles went down in a single chaotic moment. Walker was speechless, his experienced operator's composure finally broken. "That's not. You can't." "Sullivan, north approach is clear," Emma transmitted calmly. "You have your 2 minutes." "Confirmed," came the reply, Sullivan's voice betraying no reaction to what must have been an astonishing sight from his position. Proceeding with extraction. The remainder of the operation proceeded without incident. Sullivan's team successfully extracted the hostage, an intelligence officer named Crawford who had been held for 16 days, and made their way to the exfiltration point where a helicopter was waiting. Emma and Walker broke down their position with practiced efficiency, leaving no trace of their presence on the ridgeline. As they began their descent toward the secondary extraction point, Walker finally found his voice again. "Professor," he said, shaking his head, "I've been doing this for 15 years. I've worked with the best snipers in the world. What you just did," he trailed off, unable to find adequate words. "Applied mathematics," Emma replied simply, though she knew it had been something more. The equations had given her the framework, but something deeper had guided her execution, an intuitive understanding that transcended conscious calculation. "Whatever you call it," Walker said, "you just rewrote the book on what's possible." The extraction helicopter picked them up 4 hours later from a designated location, 15 kilometers from the target area. When they boarded, Emma found Sullivan waiting, his expression unreadable. "Mission successful," he reported formally. "Target extracted with non-life-threatening injuries. No team casualties. No collateral damage." He paused, then added, "Your shot saved the operation, Professor. And, quite possibly, all our lives." As the helicopter lifted off, Emma looked out at the vast mountain landscape below. 1 month ago, she had been a mathematics professor who had never held a rifle, whose biggest concerns were research grants and academic publications. Now she had deployed to a combat zone and made shots that defied conventional wisdom about what was humanly possible. The transformation should have felt jarring, disorienting. Instead, it felt like the most natural progression imaginable, the perfect application of principles she had always understood in theory but never before applied so directly. When they landed at the forward operating base, General Mitchell was waiting. He approached as Emma disembarked, extending his hand with genuine respect. "Professor Lawson," he said warmly, "welcome back. I understand you made quite an impression." Emma accepted his handshake, too exhausted for formalities. "The mathematics worked, General, that's all." Mitchell smiled knowingly. "I think we both know it was more than that." He gestured toward a waiting aircraft. "There are some people in Washington very eager to speak with you. Project Catalyst has attracted attention at the highest levels." Emma felt a flutter of unease. "What kind of attention?" "The kind that changes history," Mitchell replied cryptically. "But that's a conversation for tomorrow. For now, get some rest. You've earned it." Rest, however, proved elusive. Back in her temporary quarters, Emma found herself unable to sleep, despite her physical exhaustion. Her mind kept returning to that moment on the ridgeline, the perfect clarity she'd experienced, the seamless integration of theory and application. A knock at her door revealed Walker, looking similarly sleepless. "Thought you might want to know," he said without preamble. "Crawford's going to make it. The intelligence he carried was time-sensitive. Your shot didn't just save him. It potentially saved hundreds of others." Emma nodded, absorbing this information. "And the 4 hostiles?" Walker's expression turned serious. "That's actually why I'm here. Technical assessment just confirmed what the field report said. 1 shot, Professor. 1 bullet that took down 4 targets through a ricochet pattern you calculated on the fly." He shook his head in continued disbelief. "They're calling it the Lawson effect. It's already becoming legend. After Walker left, Emma sat on the edge of her bed, contemplating what her life had become. The Lawson effect. A shot that shouldn't have been possible. A civilian mathematician transforming into something the military had never seen before. She pulled out her notebook, turning to the calculations she'd made for that crucial shot. The mathematics was elegant in its complexity, a perfect representation of how theoretical principles could solve seemingly impossible real-world problems. Yet there was something beyond the equations, something she was only beginning to understand about the integration of mind, body, and mathematics under extreme pressure. The next morning, Emma was escorted to a secure video conference facility where a panel of military and intelligence officials awaited her report. As she detailed the operation and the mathematical principles behind her shots, she could see the dawning recognition on their faces. They were witnessing the birth of an entirely new approach to precision operations. Professor Lawson, the lead official, said when she had finished, "What you've demonstrated goes beyond improving existing capabilities. It represents a paradigm shift in how we approach precision engagement. The question now is, how do we scale this? How do we teach others what you can do?" It was the question Emma had been asking herself since the operation concluded. The honest answer was that she wasn't sure. Her approach combined advanced theoretical mathematics with an intuitive application that might not be easily transferable. Yet she had already seen Walker and Reed beginning to grasp the underlying principles. "I believe it's possible," she said carefully, "but it will require a fundamental rethinking of how we select and train precision shooters. We need people who can think mathematically under pressure, who can see patterns in chaos." "Are you volunteering to develop this program, Professor?" the official asked. Emma considered the question. Her sabbatical from MIT would end in 3 months. Her academic career, her research, her entire professional identity waited for her back in that world of theory and peer review. Yet here was an opportunity to apply those same principles in ways that directly saved lives. "Yes," she said finally, "but on my terms. This isn't about creating super soldiers or expanding lethal capabilities. It's about precision that minimizes harm while maximizing effectiveness. If that's what you want, then I'm your mathematician." The program that emerged over the following weeks was unlike anything the military had previously developed. Project Catalyst expanded beyond its original scope, becoming a comprehensive training protocol that integrated advanced mathematics with practical marksmanship. Emma worked directly with a select group of candidates, including Reed, who had become her most dedicated student despite his initial skepticism. "The key," Emma explained during one training session, "isn't memorizing formulas or even understanding ballistic theory. It's developing a mathematical intuition, the ability to see and feel the numbers in real time. Like musical perfect pitch, but for bullet trajectories," Reed suggested, showing how far his thinking had evolved. "Exactly," Emma agreed. "Some people are born with it, others can develop it with proper training. Either way, it transforms the impossible into the merely difficult." As the program advanced, Emma continued to push the boundaries of what was considered possible. She developed new techniques for multiple target engagement, environmental adaptation, and predictive firing, hitting not where a target was, but where it would be, based on mathematical models of human movement patterns. The results were transformative. Within 6 months, her original team was regularly making shots that would have been considered impossible under previous paradigms. More importantly, they were beginning to teach others, creating a cascading effect that promised to revolutionize precision operations across multiple agencies. Emma's 1-year sabbatical from MIT came and went. The university offered her an extended leave, then a part-time arrangement, and finally accepted her resignation with reluctant understanding. The woman who had never held a rifle before meeting Captain Sullivan had found her true calling not in theoretical research, but in its perfect application. On the anniversary of her first day at Camp Nighthawk, Emma stood on the same firing range where she had first demonstrated her unprecedented abilities. Beside her stood 20 candidates for the expanded Project Catalyst, men and women selected not for their shooting experience, but for their mathematical aptitude and adaptability under pressure. "Most of you have never fired a weapon before today," she addressed them, echoing her own experience a year earlier. "That's by design. We're not looking for experienced shooters to teach new tricks. We're developing an entirely new approach that integrates mathematics and marksmanship from the ground up. She picked up a Barrett rifle, the same model she had first fired on this range. Today, you'll each attempt a shot that conventional wisdom says should be impossible for a first-time shooter. A target at 1,000 meters, with variable winds and changing light conditions. The candidates exchanged nervous glances, their expressions mirroring the disbelief she had seen from Sullivan and his operators a year ago. "You won't all succeed," Emma continued honestly. "Some of you will discover that this particular integration of theory and practice isn't your strength. That's valuable information too. But some of you," she smiled, remembering her own journey, "some of you will surprise yourselves with capabilities you never knew you possessed." As the first candidate stepped up to the firing line, Emma felt a profound sense of purpose. She had transformed from an academic outsider into the architect of a revolution in precision operations. The woman who had never held a rifle until the Delta Force captain handed her his Barrett and M4 had found her true calling not in the theoretical perfection of equations, but in their practical application when lives hung in the balance. "Remember," she told the nervous mathematician preparing for his first shot, "the math doesn't change. Trust the equations, but feel the solution." She stepped back, allowing him to settle behind the rifle. "Now show me what's possible." 5 years after Emma Lawson first picked up a rifle at Camp Nighthawk, she stood in the Roosevelt Room of the White House, waiting to brief the president on Project Catalyst's unprecedented achievements. Through the windows, she could see snow falling gently on the south lawn, a stark contrast to the desert heat where her journey had begun. Professor Lawson, the president's chief of staff, greeted her, extending his hand. "The president will join us shortly. He's been following your program's progress with great interest." Emma nodded, still somewhat uncomfortable with the high-level attention her work had garnered. Despite 5 years of extraordinary success, part of her remained the academic mathematician, more at home with equations than political figures. Sullivan entered the room, now wearing the eagle insignia of a full colonel. The years had added a few streaks of gray to his temples, but had only sharpened his commanding presence. Behind him followed General Mitchell, whose early faith in Emma's abilities had launched what many now considered the most significant advancement in precision operations since the invention of the rifle scope. "Quite a change from that first day at Nighthawk," Sullivan commented quietly as he took his place beside her. Emma smiled, remembering the skepticism that had greeted her arrival. "I believe you called my theories classroom fantasies with no practical application." "One of my better assessments," Sullivan replied with a rare smile, "considering what they actually became." Before Emma could respond, the door opened and the president entered. Everyone stood as he made his way around the table, greeting each person individually. "Professor Lawson," he said warmly when he reached her, "the mathematician who changed warfare. Your reputation precedes you." "Thank you, Mr. President," Emma replied, "though I prefer to think of it as changing precision operations to save lives, not take them." The president nodded thoughtfully. "An important distinction, and one I understand your program emphasizes." He gestured for everyone to sit. "I've read the briefing papers, but I'd like to hear directly from you. What exactly has Project Catalyst achieved, and where is it going?" Emma activated the secure presentation display embedded in the conference table. "Mr. President, 5 years ago, we began with a simple premise, that advanced mathematical modeling could transform precision shooting beyond conventional limits. What started as theoretical ballistics research has evolved into something far more comprehensive." The display showed footage from recent Catalyst operations, precision interventions where single, perfectly calculated shots had diffused crisis situations with minimal force and zero collateral casualties. To date, sir, Catalyst operators have conducted 127 successful missions across 19 countries. These operations have directly saved an estimated 840 lives, many of them hostages or civilians in danger zones. Emma paused, allowing the significance to register. More importantly, they've done so while reducing overall casualties by 91% compared to conventional tactical responses. The president leaned forward, studying the statistics with genuine interest. "These numbers are remarkable, Professor. But I understand there's been some resistance within traditional special operations communities." Emma exchanged glances with Sullivan, who nodded for her to continue candidly. "Yes, sir. What we're doing challenges decades of established doctrine. We're selecting candidates based on mathematical aptitude rather than traditional military backgrounds. 60% of our operators had never fired a weapon before joining the program. She highlighted several key personnel files on the display. Former academics, engineers, even a concert pianist. People with exceptional pattern recognition and spatial reasoning abilities. And they outperform traditional special operators? The president asked skeptically. In precision shooting scenarios. Consistently, Emma confirmed. In broader combat operations, they work in integrated teams, where traditional operators handle close-quarters elements while Catalyst personnel provide precision support. General Mitchell joined the conversation. Mr. President, I was among the skeptics initially. The idea that mathematicians could outshoot experienced combat veterans seemed absurd. But the results are undeniable. Catalyst teams are redefining what's possible in precision operations. The president nodded slowly, then addressed a question directly to Sullivan. Colonel, you've led conventional special operations teams for years. How do you reconcile this new approach with traditional methods? Sullivan considered his response carefully. Sir, special operations have always evolved through innovation. From the OSS in World War II to modern counterterrorism, we adapt or we fail. What Professor Lawson has created isn't a replacement for traditional capabilities, but an enhancement that gives us options we never had before. Options like the Shanghai incident, the president noted, referencing a classified operation from the previous year that had prevented a potential international crisis. Exactly, sir, Sullivan confirmed. Traditional methods would have required a direct assault with high casualty potential. Instead, a 3-person Catalyst team resolved the situation with 2 precision shots from 8 kilometers away. No casualties, no international incident, problem solved. The president turned back to Emma. And where does the program go from here, Professor? This was the crucial moment Emma had prepared for. Mr. President, we're at an inflection point. Project Catalyst has proven its value in specialized operations, but its potential extends much further. She brought up new slides showing training methodology and selection criteria. We're proposing an expansion that would integrate Catalyst principles across all military branches and select law enforcement agencies. The budgetary implications would be significant, the Chief of Staff interjected. Initially, yes, Emma acknowledged, but the long-term savings in both financial and human costs are substantial. Traditional training produces proficient marksmen after approximately 10,000 hours of practice. Our methods achieve superior results in less than 2,000 hours, with lower ammunition expenditure and reduced operational risks. The president studied her for a moment. You're not just talking about better snipers, are you, Professor? You're proposing a fundamental shift in how we approach precision in all operations. Yes, sir, Emma confirmed, impressed by his perception. Catalyst isn't just about shooting. It's about applying mathematical precision to reduce violence while increasing effectiveness. Every bullet that doesn't need to be fired represents a potential life saved. The meeting continued for another hour as they discussed implementation details, interagency cooperation, and potential diplomatic implications. Throughout the discussion, Emma found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment, from a theoretical mathematician who had never held a weapon to the architect of a program briefing the president on transforming military operations. When the meeting concluded, the president approached Emma privately. Professor, I understand you've declined all military rank and commendations offered to you over the years. Yes, sir. I'm more effective as a civilian specialist, and my contribution is in developing the methodology, not implementing it. The president smiled. An unusual perspective in Washington, where most people grab every accolade available. He studied her with genuine curiosity. What drives you, Professor? You could have remained in academia, publishing papers and collecting tenure. Instead, you've spent 5 years in some of the most dangerous environments on Earth, developing a program that many said couldn't work. Why? Emma considered the question carefully. It was something she had asked herself many times over the years. Mathematics has always been about finding elegant solutions to complex problems, Mr. President. In academia, those solutions remain theoretical. Here, they save lives. She paused, remembering the hostage rescue that had first tested her abilities. When I made that first impossible shot, I discovered that equations could do more than advance knowledge. They could directly protect people. That purpose has been worth every hardship. The president nodded thoughtfully. Well, your country is grateful, Professor, even if you won't accept the medals to prove it. Your expansion proposal is approved. Let's see where this revolution in precision takes us. As Emma departed the White House, Sullivan fell into step beside her. Impressive presentation. You've come a long way from the academic who couldn't explain ballistics without differential equations. Emma laughed. And you've come a long way from the captain who thought mathematics had no place on the battlefield. They walked in companionable silence for a moment, their breath forming clouds in the winter air. There's something you should know, Sullivan said finally. The reason I was late to the meeting. We just received intelligence about a developing situation in North Africa. Humanitarian aid workers taken hostage in extremely difficult terrain. The conventional assessment is that a rescue attempt would be high risk, potentially unviable. Emma understood immediately what he wasn't saying. They want Catalyst to handle it. Sullivan nodded. The most challenging operation we've faced. Multiple hostages, experienced hostiles, mountainous terrain with unpredictable weather patterns. Beyond the effective range of conventional precision operations. But not beyond ours, Emma concluded. No, Sullivan agreed. Not beyond what you've made possible. Later that evening, Emma sat in the secure planning facility at Fort Belvoir, reviewing the operational parameters for the North Africa mission. The challenges were indeed formidable. Hostages held in a remote mountain stronghold, precision shots required at distances exceeding 2,500 meters through shifting wind patterns created by complex terrain. Reed entered the room, now a senior instructor in the Catalyst program and one of its most successful graduates. The once skeptical operator had transformed into one of Emma's strongest advocates, helping bridge the gap between traditional special operations culture and her mathematical approach. I heard about North Africa, he said without preamble. They're saying it's impossible. Emma smiled faintly. They always say that. This time they might be right. Reed studied the topographical displays. These conditions. We've never operated in anything this complex. Which is precisely why they need us, Emma replied, already making preliminary calculations. Conventional wisdom says there's no solution. Mathematics says otherwise. Reed nodded, his initial skepticism giving way to the confidence that had developed over 5 years of seeing the impossible become routine. Who's taking the lead? Walker, Emma answered, with Jensen and Takumi as the precision team. Reed raised an eyebrow. Takumi? She only completed final qualification last month, and scored higher than anyone in program history, Emma reminded him. Including you. Reed conceded the point with a rueful smile. Another academic you transformed into a precision shooter? Former concert violinist, actually, Emma corrected. Perfect pitch, exceptional spatial awareness, and natural mathematical intuition. She sees patterns in chaos that even our algorithms sometimes miss. As they continued reviewing the operation plans, Emma reflected on how far the program had come. What had begun as a theoretical application of ballistic algorithms had evolved into a comprehensive methodology for selecting, training, and deploying precision specialists with capabilities that defied conventional wisdom. The North Africa operation would test everything they had developed. At its core would be the principles Emma had discovered on that first day at Camp Nighthawk, that mathematics could transform the impossible into the achievable when properly applied under pressure. 3 days later, Emma stood in the command center at Fort Belvoir, monitoring the North Africa operation in real time. Walker's team had deployed successfully and established positions around the target area, preparing for what would be the most complex precision intervention in the program's history. Catalyst team in position, the operations officer announced. Environmental data streaming now. Emma studied the incoming data with focused intensity. The conditions were even more challenging than intelligence had suggested. Shifting winds at multiple elevations, significant humidity variations, and temperature gradients created by the mountain terrain. These variables are beyond our standard modeling parameters, one of the technical specialists noted with concern. Then we'll expand the parameters, Emma replied calmly, already making adjustments to the advanced ballistic algorithms displayed on her screen. The mathematics doesn't change, only the complexity of the application. For the next hour, Emma worked with the support team to develop firing solutions for each precision specialist, accounting for the extraordinary conditions they faced. The operation required synchronized shots across multiple positions, each at extreme range, with zero margin for error. Final calculations complete, Emma announced finally. Transmitting to the team now. The command center fell silent as the firing solutions were delivered to the operators in the field. Everyone present understood the stakes. 11 hostages, including medical personnel, whose lives depended on the perfect application of mathematical principles Emma had developed. Catalyst Actual confirms receipt of firing solutions, the communications officer reported. Teams moving to final firing positions. Emma felt the familiar tension that always accompanied these moments, the culmination of years of research, training, and refinement distilled into single crucial instances where theory met reality with lives hanging in the balance. Catalyst teams in final position. Came the update. Precision specialists report conditions match calculations, awaiting execution order. General Mitchell, who had joined the operation monitoring, leaned toward Emma. Professor, these firing solutions, the distance and conditions involved, are we certain they're viable? Emma met his gaze steadily. The mathematics is sound, General. These shots are difficult but not impossible with proper calculation and execution. Mitchell nodded, accepting her assessment as he had learned to do over the years. Very well. Give the execution order. Catalyst Actual, you are cleared to execute. The operations officer transmitted. Repeat. You are cleared to execute. The next 3 minutes unfolded with the precision of a mathematical proof reaching its inevitable conclusion. On the main display, satellite imagery showed the synchronized precision shots impacting exactly as calculated, neutralizing security systems, creating strategic distractions, and eliminating specific threats without endangering hostages. Extraction team moving to primary objective, came Walker's calm report. Precision specialists maintaining overwatch. Emma watched as the operation proceeded exactly as planned. The extraction team reached the hostages without detection, secured them, and began their withdrawal along the predetermined route. At 2 critical junctures, additional precision shots from catalyst specialists eliminated emerging threats at distances conventional snipers would have considered well beyond effective range. All hostages secured, the operations officer announced eventually. Extraction team proceeding to evacuation point, 0 casualties. A subdued cheer went through the command center. Another impossible mission completed successfully, more lives saved through the precise application of force guided by mathematical principles. General Mitchell shook Emma's hand warmly. Extraordinary work, Professor. Once again, you've demonstrated that your approach saves lives when conventional methods would likely fail. Emma accepted the compliment with characteristic modesty. The credit belongs to the operators who executed the mission, General. I just provided the framework. Later, as the command center transitioned to routine monitoring, Emma sat alone reviewing the operation data. Each successful mission generated valuable information that refined their models, improving future capabilities. Sullivan joined her, setting a cup of coffee on the desk beside her. Another miracle for the Catalyst files, he commented. Emma smiled. Not a miracle, Colonel. Just applied mathematics. After 5 years, I'm still not entirely sure there's a difference, Sullivan replied, studying her with thoughtful consideration. You know, when you first arrived at Nighthawk, I gave you less than a week before you'd wash out and return to academia. Now you're briefing presidents and revolutionizing military operations. Life takes unexpected turns, Emma acknowledged. Sometimes the most significant opportunities come disguised as impossible challenges. Sullivan nodded toward the screen still displaying the operation data. The program's success has exceeded even the most optimistic projections. You've created something that will outlast all of us, Professor. A fundamental shift in how precision operations are conceived and executed. Emma considered this assessment. Perhaps, but there's still resistance to the core concept that mathematical principles can outperform traditional experience and instinct. There will always be resistance to paradigm shifts, Sullivan replied. But results speak louder than doctrine. What you've accomplished can't be denied or dismissed anymore. The conversation was interrupted by a young lieutenant who approached with obvious hesitation. "Professor Lawson? I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. She says she's from MIT. Emma exchanged a puzzled glance with Sullivan. Her connections to academic circles had diminished significantly over the years as her classified work expanded. In the conference room, Emma found Dr. Eleanor Chen, the current chair of MIT's mathematics department and Emma's former academic mentor. "Eleanor," Emma greeted her with genuine surprise. "This is unexpected. I didn't know you had security clearance for this facility." "Special arrangement," Dr. Chen replied with a smile. "Some very high-level people helped facilitate this meeting." She studied Emma with the penetrating gaze that had intimidated generations of doctoral candidates. "You look different, Emma. Military life agrees with you, it seems." Emma laughed softly. "Hardly military life. I'm still a civilian specialist." "A civilian specialist who has revolutionized precision operations and saved hundreds of lives," Chen noted. "Your work here has not gone unnoticed, even in academic circles with the appropriate clearances." "What brings you here, Eleanor?" Emma asked, curious about this unexpected connection to her former life. Chen placed a folder on the table between them. "The Institute is establishing a new department, Applied Mathematical Operations. A hybrid program combining theoretical mathematics with practical applications in crisis response, precision intervention, and threat mitigation." Emma opened the folder, scanning its contents with growing interest. "This looks like catalyst for civilians." "In a sense, yes," Chen confirmed. "Taking the principles you've developed here and applying them to humanitarian crisis response, disaster management, even medical intervention planning. Mathematics applied directly to saving lives in non-military contexts." "And you want my input?" Emma guessed. "We want more than your input, Emma," Chen said directly. "We want you to lead it. To bring what you've learned here back to academia, to train a new generation of mathematical practitioners who can apply these principles across multiple disciplines." The offer took Emma by complete surprise. She had long ago accepted that her academic career was effectively over, sacrificed for the more immediate impact of her work with Project Catalyst. "I'm flattered, Eleanor, but my work here is established," Chen finished for her. "You've built something remarkable, Emma. The question is, what's the next evolution? Do you continue refining what already works, or do you expand these principles into new frontiers?" It was a profound question, one that resonated with Emma's fundamental approach to mathematical problems, never settling for initial solutions, but constantly seeking more elegant, comprehensive approaches. "The program would be fully integrated with your work here," Chen continued. "Appropriate security protocols, classified components where necessary, but also the opportunity to expand these principles beyond military applications, to create civilian specialists who can apply mathematical precision to saving lives in different contexts." Emma considered the possibilities. The core principles she had developed, mathematical modeling under pressure, precision application of minimal force, optimal solutions to complex variables, had applications far beyond military operations. "I'll need to discuss this with my team here," she said finally. "This work is collaborative, not just mine." Chen nodded, understanding. "Of course, the offer remains open." She rose to leave. "Just remember, Emma, the greatest mathematical breakthroughs have always come when principles developed in one domain find applications in entirely new ones." After Chen departed, Emma found herself standing at the window of the conference room, looking out at the training facilities, where new Catalyst specialists were developing the skills that had once seemed impossible. In 5 years, they had transformed a theoretical concept into an operational reality that had saved hundreds of lives. What might be possible in another 5 years if these same principles were applied across broader domains? Sullivan found her still contemplating this question an hour later. "Chen offered you a position," he said. "Not really a question." "Word travels fast," Emma observed. "In certain circles." Sullivan joined her at the window. "You're considering it." "I am," Emma admitted. "Not to leave this work, but to expand it. To create civilian applications for the principles we've developed here." Sullivan was quiet for a moment, watching the training exercises below. When you first came to Nighthawk, I thought you were trying to turn soldiers into mathematicians. What you actually did was far more profound. You showed us that mathematics isn't just about calculations, but about seeing patterns where others see chaos. That perspective could have applications beyond what we're doing here, Emma suggested. It absolutely could, Sullivan agreed. And perhaps it should. He turned to face her directly. You know, the truly revolutionary aspects of military innovations throughout history weren't the weapons themselves, but the principles behind them. Those principles invariably found their greatest impact when they expanded beyond military applications. Emma smiled, appreciating his unexpected support. Are you saying you think I should take the position? I'm saying that what you've built here won't diminish if you expand its reach. Quite the opposite. Sullivan gestured toward the training field. These specialists will continue the work you started. The question is, where else might these principles create the same kind of impact? That evening, Emma returned to her office and pulled out the worn notebook she had carried since her first day at Camp Nighthawk. Its pages chronicled an extraordinary journey, from theoretical algorithms to life-saving applications, from academic abstraction to concrete reality. On a fresh page, she began outlining possibilities for civilian applications of the Catalyst methodology. Crisis response teams using mathematical precision to conduct rescues in natural disasters. Medical specialists applying optimal intervention principles to emergency trauma situations. Humanitarian operations employing minimal force principles to protect vulnerable populations. The mathematics remained the same, only the applications expanded. 6 weeks later, Emma Lawson stood in MIT's main auditorium, addressing the inaugural class of the Applied Mathematical Operations program. Before her sat an extraordinary group: former academics, emergency responders, crisis managers, and humanitarian specialists, all selected for their mathematical aptitude and their commitment to applying precision principles to saving lives. 5 years ago, she began, I was a theoretical mathematician who had never held a rifle. When a Delta Force captain handed me his Barrett and M4, no one expected what happened next, least of all me. She smiled at the memory. What I discovered in that moment, and have confirmed countless times since, is that mathematics isn't just an academic discipline. It's a universal language for solving the most challenging problems we face. Emma moved from behind the podium, engaging directly with the assembled students. The principles you'll learn in this program weren't developed in classrooms or laboratories. They were forged in situations where precision meant the difference between life and death. You'll learn to apply mathematical modeling under pressure, to see patterns in chaos, to find optimal solutions when suboptimal ones carry unacceptable costs. She noted Sullivan and Reed sitting quietly at the back of the auditorium, supportive witnesses to this new chapter in the Catalyst journey. Some will question whether mathematical principles can truly transform crisis response, the way they've transformed precision operations. They'll insist that experience and instinct outweigh calculation and modeling. Emma smiled, remembering similar skepticism 5 years earlier. To them, I offer the same response I gave when faced with similar doubts: the mathematics doesn't change. Only our application of it evolves. As she concluded her address, Emma felt the profound satisfaction of bringing her journey full circle, from the academic who had ventured into military applications back to academia with practical wisdom that transcended theoretical knowledge. The woman who had never held a rifle until a Delta Force captain handed her his Barrett and M4 had transformed not just military operations but her own understanding of how mathematical principles could directly serve humanity's most urgent needs. In doing so, she had created a legacy that would continue to save lives long after the details of Project Catalyst faded into classified history. Welcome, she told her new students, to the next evolution of applied mathematics, where equations save lives, calculations prevent crises, and precision serves humanity with mathematical certainty. The journey that had begun with an impossible shot was now expanding into new frontiers, guided by the enduring principle that had started it all. The mathematics doesn't change, only our understanding of what's possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.